Good evening, folks. This is Lowman02. We're going to do a quick recording video of our experience with RECSUR. So this is a 100 card singleton video. If you are interested in this video or the supporting deck tech that was previously published on my YouTube page, I hope you'll pick it up for a try and show up once every Saturday at 15:30 or 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the continental United States. So this is singularly the most powerful deck I think I've ever played in the 100 card singleton format. There are certain decks that will certainly beat it, but very powerful. So let's go over the keep real fast while the game keeps on going forward. So we keep a two-lander with Nature's Lore. We do have an earlier mid-range threat and Obstinate Baloth, plus some play with Dromoka's Command, which is a pretty flexible card. We see opponent play Thoughtseize turn 1. So opponent's on a Orzhov zombie build. It's very disruptive. It has a lot of critter removal, and tries to win through synergies with zombies. So what Dion ends up taking, which I'm a little confused by, is he takes the Primeval Titan. Well, it is certainly the most powerful card in my hand. I think the ostensibly correct play was to take the Nature's Lore. Now, he doesn't know what we're on. As you see, our draw step here kind of gets us a little bit excited because we get lucky and pull a Recurring Nightmare off the top. Play our Nature's Lore, get an additional land into play. I believe, Murmuring Bosk, so tri-land, perfect fixing for our deck right now. We get Green Sun Zenith, end up playing it for Sylvan Caryatid, as we know he's a high removal deck. We want a hexproof creature because we do have the Recurring Nightmare in hand, and we want the ability to make sure when we pass the turn, we're able to get our Recurring Nightmare online. So Primeval Titan comes into play and ends up getting us our Dark Depths combo. This is a Dark Depths deck. Obviously not the best fixing for what we've got going on in our hand, and it's not ideal that he plays the Swords to Plowshares on it. But we end up getting the Dark Depths combo out regardless because it's a significant threat. And what it really will do, and I think, one thing to note is I would wait on the Swords to Plowshares until you see what they get with the Primeval Titan. But what I'm thinking at this point is, he either the jig is already up and he knows we're on it, or, I've just gotten very lucky, and I'm going to have Dark Depths, and he's not going to be able to do anything about it. So one interesting thing, I don't activate the Dark Depths right now because I figure on a black-white deck he's got a lot of ways of exiling creatures. He's got Edict effects. There's a lot of things available to deal with the Dark Depths combo or Merit Lage in his deck. So what I end up doing is I wait and I hold up Elmary's Command, passing the turn through. Typically, if you were going to activate Dark Depths to acquire Merit Lage with the Thespian Stage combo, you do it around the end step of the opponent's turn because you want to play around, sorcery-based removal that can occur to this. So I forego that right now because I think, if he's willing to play Swords to Plowshares in the dark, he probably has a lot of other means of removal, very reactive hand. And if he doesn't, it forces him to leave threats in hand because he has to leave those spells up. So what you'll see is we Elmary's Call, end up getting one of our Mana Dorks. I believe Wood Elves is the play here, is what we end up getting. Yep. So we end up sacking our Wood Elves. We get a Elves of Deep Shadow off the top, which is a good pull because we're going to get a Bayou and play this out as well and really up our mana count. All right, we see a Vindicate, which is fine because we have the Sun Titan in hand, which we intend on casting this next turn. We end up going for Sun Titan, recurring the Dark Depths back into play so that the combo is still live. We end up seeing another exiling effect on the Sun Titan, which leads me to believe, wow, he's got a lot of ways of dealing with this Merit Lage. So we pass it back, see nothing. He has to leave his mana up because, again, Merit Lage is still a threat. Attack in for 2. I think at this point in time, we pass it back, and we activate the Dark Depths, force him to have it. And I believe it's a Strive card. Silence the Believers. Is what he ends up having. And we're fine with that. It's a pretty fair exchange. It basically wasted 4 turns for him, having to leave things up to deal with it. Play on the Obstinate Baloth and essentially start looking like we're going to play a mid-range game. But we have Recurring Nightmare, and we start getting a little bit of value off that. The idea was there is that 1/1's not doing a lot of attacking for us. Why not, get it put back in the graveyard where we can Recurring Nightmare the next turn and pull additional land out of the deck. Acidic Slime's the play here. Hit one of his lands to start taking him off white mana. We see that he disfigures it. We're more than happy to have that happen. Now, yeah, we did tap kind of incorrectly there. We did not leave Dromoka's Command up, which would have been a better play. But Yeah, I really didn't intend on using Dromoka's command to do anything, to save it essentially in that situation with the living death in hand. I figured we would completely outvalue him with the gross amount of creatures that we'd acquired in it. So as you see, the game ends here. He ends up conceding. We've knocked him off of 2 lands at this point in time, and we have a decently sizable army in play. And if he wants to remove it, we have Recurring Nightmare and all of these creatures. Well, outside of the Mana Dorks, we have good reoccurring ETBs. So of note with the Sterling Grove, so we already have our Recurring Nightmare, which the Sterling Grove is specifically in here for. Or it's the main reason it's in here. Outside of some sideboard tech with Aura Shards. We probably would have ended up getting Sylvan Library because we're at 34 life and can afford to draw many cards off of that one, and/or the new 2/4 enchantment creature that pulls lands off the top. I think I was probably going to go for Sylvan Library, but at this point we're pretty sure the game's locked up. So I hope that highlights the kind of the power of the deck, and we'll go into match 2 or game 2 of this match. Okie doke. So we kick it off. We had a Miri's Guile on that first hand, but a 1-lander. I think we ended up tossing it back. Play on Hissing Quagmire, expecting that we're going to play Sack Tribelder the following turn. End up playing him out, passing the turn back. Believe opponent does nothing this turn. Now plays a Thoughtseize. Ends up grabbing the Kitchen Finks, which is a really odd choice to me. I think Eldritch Evolution is easily the most powerful card in here, but I could also see some reasons to take the Great Sable Stag if he doesn't have a means of dealing with it. We definitely do not plan on playing that out on its own, and because he has no threats in play, we leave the Great Sable Stag in hand, which is part of our sideboard tech, and play out the Deathrite Shaman. This allows us to play around Edict effects. I think what you'll see is this attack in here, play the Isafi first, just in case he has any sort of odd, conditional-based removal that occurs during the attack. We see that he does Swords to Plowshare, our Nissa, which at this point makes sense because we're getting very close to 6 lands, and he doesn't want us to draw additional cards. Get Great Sable Stag down, and at this point, we find out that Safi, Eric's daughter, is broken, unfortunately, because we do not get the Great Sable Stag back. But we do get to Eldritch Evolution for our Sidisi Undead Vizier, and get our Recurring Nightmare off of the exploit trigger. Get the Great Sable Stag back just for a blocker. With Worldly Tutor in hand, what we're thinking right now is that we're going to go for our prime time. We miscount our lands here, so slight misplay on our part. We say, oh, oops, we can't play this. And then we think about going through the motions for Recurring Nightmare, but with the Cemetery Reaper in play, we decided it's not worth it because we'd rather have our pro-black guy in play that can kind of fog out some of these zombies that he's starting to amass. We play Prime Time out, get the Dark Depths combo. And with this in play, we're pretty sure we can go over the top with the strategy that he's using unless he has any instant speed exiling removal. So he makes another zombie out of one of our cards in the graveyard. One thing that's interesting to note, I think, it may have been better for him to wait to activate the Cemetery Reaper until our turn. We do attack in here, fully expecting that it's going to get double blocked and killed, and it does. And we end up getting a manland off of it, the Treetop Village, activating while it's still tapped, and then sacrificing the manland to get the prime time back. With prime time back, I believe we get Urborg, and I forget the other card we end up getting with it. No, we don't. So we have enough mana available. We don't need the Urborg at this point. We get some mana fixing, and we get Wasteland to get rid of his utility lands. We see an attack in, so this attack doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. These are both very large creatures, but I have a pro-black guy, and I have one creature that's capable of killing the other lord. Once the one lord dies, the 3 damage that was done by the Great Sable Stag is enough to get rid of the other lord, which puts him in a significantly worse spot. He's able to get a decent chunk of damage in with his 1 zombie token that he created with the Cemetery Reaper. But at this point, we're feeling pretty good about this game. We feel like we have it pretty well locked up because we have a better board, and we have Merit Lage at our beck and call. Okay, we see a Black Sun Zenith, which wipes the board. He's tapped down at this point. We generate a Merit Lage and attack in, putting him in -7. And that's the first game. All right, we'll go on to game 2. Game 2 is against Yokai. Generally a mono green player, and I believe he's on it in this deck or this build as well. And we see a pretty decent hand. So we have the Elmeri's Call, which is not a bad pull. We play out the Dryad Arbor first because if he's going to have removal, which we don't expect him to have in mono green, we'd rather have that get knocked down right away so we can protect some of our better threats. We end up getting the Yavimaya Dryad, which we're a little bit punished for because we probably should have gotten Wood Elves, which was the proper play, because we ended up drawing a 1-drop, which we didn't have in our hand prior. play out our Eternal Witness. We looked into our Primeval Titan. The Elmiri's Call would have definitely gotten that card, but I think we end up getting another Mana Ramper at this point in time, or an Acidic Slime or something like that. No, we get Sidisi. So, yeah, we're thinking about generating a big Living Death at some point in time, which I think is what you'll eventually see us sacrifice the Sidisi for. But at this point, what we do is we set up the Dark Depths combo. And I believe what we see is we see him play a Woodland Bellower. The Woodland Bellower gets a Fierce Empath, which gets a Hornet Queen. So he didn't see that in the reveal, but he did get a Hornet Queen with it. So we go ahead and do our Alpha Strike in, expecting to exchange cards. Now we're thinking in our head is, hey, we're going to wait an extra turn to get our Merit Lage into play, and we're going to force the opponent to play out his Hornet Queen and then Living Death our entire board. So that's why you see us get Urborg plus the Phyrexian Tower so that we can sacrifice any creatures we are forced to play this turn. We play out the Deathrite Sham because what we're thinking is we want to get rid of that Fierce Empath in his graveyard. We really don't care about Woodland Bellower. 3-drops that don't tutor, which I think he's out of at this point, are not that as threatening, and they're not really going to stop what we're going to get up to. So we go ahead and get rid of the Fierce Empath, play on an Academy Rector, which is even better. And we end up Living Deathing, getting rid of all of his board that he's just put into play to stop our Dark Depths combo. I believe getting our Recurring Nightmare on the Sidisi. We get the Courser of Krufix. It may have been better. It honestly was better to not get the Recurring Nightmare with Sidisi and grab something else, and then put the Recurring Nightmare into play off of the Academy Rector trigger. But we're playing kind of quick because this deck, if you don't get a lot of play experience playing this deck, there's a lot of tutoring and a lot of decision making involved, and it can definitely eat clock. So I don't think it was. I don't think the play mattered that much at the end of the day, because I think at this point we've pretty much already locked up the game and are going to win. Opponent ends up thinking so too. When we end up Elmiri's calling for a Shriek Maw, which we intend on recurring over and over and over again to wipe his entire board, we'll get to lethal attack. And if that for some reason gets disrupted or doesn't work, even though I don't think he has a lot of means to disrupt that, we'll just fire up the Thespian Stage, Dark Depths combo, and attack overhead, activating all of that on his end step if he takes the turn back. He does not. He opts to concede at this point in time. So we'll go to the next game. This is definitely a much more close game, and it's actually pretty entertaining because I think both decks really showcase what they do very well in this match. As you see, we have a Sack Tri-Belder again. We'll play him out and go ahead and ramp up to our third mana, have 4 mana on turn 3, or correction, turn 3. We see Tireless Tracker come out. We're fine with that. It's a good card. So we end up playing out our Yavimaya Dryad at this point in time, get a Murmuring Boss, if I'm not mistaken, and pass it back. We see him play a land down. He gets a virtual card. We go ahead and block. So the idea here is, we're a Living Death, Recurring Nightmare deck. I'll block out, 4 to 3 damage, especially if it means that my opponent on mono green is tapping lands to pump up his card and draw cards. That's not threatening to me. So what we end up seeing here is a Sword of Fire or Feast and Famine, which is pretty threatening. Now, we're not going to throw the Courser away because that thing can gain us just a ton of life. And what we're hoping to do now is use the Sylvan Library to find something decent off the top deck and get after our Primeval Titan, which will really allow us to gain a ton of life off the Courser, plus go over the top of them with Dark Depths. We do have the Rex Sage inside our hand, which allows us to get rid of the Sword of Light and Shadow, and then we utilize our Dromoka's Command to get rid of the Abzan Beastmaster, as we don't want him drawing even more cards than he's already got. We see a bunch of nonsense plays, bunch of mana dorks. He's already on a ton of mana. We knew that we had Court of Calling on top due to the library last turn. We did not know Natural Order was up there, but we're very happy to find it. We get rid of Rex Age, bring in the Primeval Titan, and at this point in time, get the Dark Depths combo online. Of note, we also get to gain a bunch of life. So we knock out the Rogue's Passage at this point. We're not extremely low on life, but at the same time, with as many clues as he has in play, we have some cause to fear that him making something unblockable could end the game very fast. He's got a Natural Order of his own. So like I say, we really showcase what both decks do. His deck is more of a mana ramp strategy, mono green mana ramp strategy that utilizes Natural Order to get cards like Crater Hoof Behemoth to make his mana dorks viable threats. As you'll see, the Courser of Krufix and the Primeval Titan have done a great job gaining us a ton of life. At this point, we do have to block with both of our cards, but we're able to favorably block the Manador, the Finthorn Elves, and we cash in our Corsair Crew Fix. It's really done its job at this point in time. He attacks us, putting us down to 3 life, so we're not at a very healthy life total right now. We do manage to get a Sidisi off the top, which we're very happy to see. What Sidisi will allow us to do is, one, attack in, get additional lands. We end up going for a Machuca Bog on his graveyard to set up a very big Living Death turn. So we end up playing out Sidisi, sacrificing the Primeval Titan. Note that we do have Dark Depths up right now if we want to activate that to put an additional 20/20 into play, and we do have the Treetop Village available to us. What we fully expect to do here is cash in our Sidisi Undead Vizier and block with the 20/20. If he finds a way to deal with the 20/20, then we'll Living Death the following turn and put a massive graveyard into play. And yeah, we understand completely that he will get back a Crater Hoof Behemoth and or a Tireless Tracker, but the Crater Hoof pump, on my turn is really not as threatening as a pump on his turn. So we block favorably, and he realizes, hey, there's nothing I can do about this, and the 20/20 would have gotten him the following turn, so we see a concession. A good game against Yoker. Okay, we will go to Game 3. So unfortunately, only a 3-game series. We're playing Total Hate. Total Hate is on a very interesting 5-color deck. I like to think it's like a 5-color good stuff deck, really. It's a lot of 2-card combos put together. We play some very interesting matches here. Of note, I think his deck is very interesting. I think it's very good. But I think decks like that do have a tendency to beat themselves sometimes. You won't see that in here. I think we play some good matches. But the risk you run is, there's Blood Moons out there, and, sometimes decks like that just don't get there because, you have so many 2-card combos put together. And sometimes it's just not going to get there because you're going to find the wrong parts at the wrong time. And some of the cards just really aren't as good on their own. So we see a Living Death here. We've been developing our board, playing a mid-range game, really, just beating him to death. And we're fine with a Living Death there. It's not an overextension because we have a lot of power left in our hand. We end up doing a Court of Calling for a secure Tribe Elder, and what we're thinking is we can use Pattern of Rebirth very favorably with this card to ramp ourselves and get after a much larger creature, which will be our Primeval Titan. So you see that's what we end up doing. He's got a Jason play. Not a lot of goodness to bouncing a Primeval Titan, and you won't see him do that. So we get the Dark Depths combo into play and pass it back. Note that we do have Crop Rotation up. I think what you'll see him play here is an Acidic Slime. A great card. He'll target our Thespian Stage. We end up crop rotating it to get something else into play. Caracas. So he goes for a Living Wish. I believe he gets some non-basic land hate. I think he gets one of his Dwarven Blast Miner or Dwarven Miner. We end up playing on our Sun Titan, getting back our Thespian Stage, attacking in to destroy the Jace because we want to keep him off of cards. He'll block with his Acidic Slime, putting our Primeval Titan in the graveyard. And note that we do get our Urborg and Wasteland with that, so we do have the Dark Depths combo open right now, even though we do not have what appears to be 4 mana available, or 2 mana available to activate it. He retargets off of Sack from Snapcaster using a Recurring Nightmare. We end up playing our Merit Lage token, and with 2 mana, he realizes he does not have an answer to the 20/20 that's going to come over the top of his Acidic Slime the following turn. And that's our first game. So second game, a lot more interesting, a lot longer, and this was a great game, really. Really, both decks got to do what they came to the table to do, and unfortunately for us, we don't win this game, this round, but we end up winning the match. So you'll see him, he's ramping, he's got, prismatic colors, we got a Solemn Simulacrum in play. We have a much slower hand than he does. We end up getting the Knight of the Reliquary. Unfortunately, he eats the Swords to Plowshares. He starts playing a bunch of green good stuff creatures that really aren't frightening us. So we gain some life, start playing out mid-range threats of our own to start blocking. Go ahead and get an attack in. We see a block, and we end up using the Dramoka's command to knock out the Scavenging Ooze, which we don't want to get big, and we want to keep our graveyard open. So we end up getting Bribery here. He pulls on a Sidisi, going for another card in his deck. I believe it is an Eternal Witness, if I'm not mistaken. You'll see that it kind of gets ugly because Bribery gets recursed like 2 or 3 times. I think 3 times total. We play on our Kitchen Finks, decent mid-range threat. It's fine. Yep. So the Eternal Witness comes into play. He does not have the mana available this turn to recast Bribery, but we know it's coming. So we go ahead and knock out some of his mana to keep him choked on it. End up attacking. And we're thinking right now is we don't mind if Kitchen Finks dies. You know, we have the Revel Art coming in. We want some of our cards like Eternal Witness to die because we want to either get a Dromoka's Command back or just be able to really rebuy any of our cards in the graveyard, plus attack overhead. So Revel Art's not bad. Opponent rebriberies us, gets our Sun Titan, which has disgusting implications for bribery with Eternal Witness currently in play. Obviously, we're passing the Eternal Witness through to attack us. We have tons of life, and we really don't want that thing in the graveyard, as it'll just be more briberies coming our way. Interesting to note, he does get Protean Hulk with his last bribery, or his last bribery target. I thought that was odd because I would have figured he would have gone for Primeval Titan. You'll find out that his deck does not have a lot of as much synergy as our deck does with the Protean Hulk, which unfortunately you don't get to see highlighted in any of these games. You do, however, get to see it in more of a humor piece on me playing against Sugar Daddy in one of my other YouTube videos that shows the power of Protean Hulk, where we essentially get hit by two annihilating varieties of the Eldrazi and still manage to pull on a win through the use of Protean Hulk. So Forest Walk actually coming into play here. We continue to get in. We're trying to life him at this point because we know inevitability is not on our side. And we also have hopes that the Sylvan Library will find something useful off the top. So we start seeing Recurring Nightmare on his side, just get disgusting amounts of value. A Swords to Plowshares comes back in. So with Mother Runes in play, we have all green threats in play right now. What we're really hoping to do is build up our board and get a threat that is not green, so that he can't attack through with the Scoop Mob, which is now becoming a very, very large threat. We end up playing out our Angel here to recur the Thragtusk. Obviously Eternal Witness would be awesome to be able to recur, but at this point with his Scavenging Ooze just devouring our graveyard, there's really not a lot of options, and he gets most of the good stuff anyways. As you'll see, like I was talking about the Protean Hulk not really being synergistic with his deck, what we see him end up getting is a Dwarven Miner and a True Name Nemesis, which is like, it's pretty anemic off that card. Honestly, I think I'd rather just have the big 6/6 body. Not really, but I mean, it's still, not that great. Whereas like something like this deck right here, what we end up getting is we get, what is it, Celestial Guide, whatever the Angel is with Protection Black that recurs any critter from the graveyard and puts it back into play. We end up getting that, plus likely a land in the Dryad Arbor, and a one drop or 2-drop mana dork. And plus we'd get the Protean Hulk back. So, this deck's really built to use Protean Hulk. That's kind of what I talked to another player about this match specifically. And I think, this is a 13-turn game. And frankly, up until, a point, really it was Swords to Plowshares that ended up getting me. If I could have blocked this turn, I think I still had ounce to what was going on based on the Fauna Shaman. And really what it would have required was getting any creature in the top 3 cards so that I could search for cards of my own. But really, this deck has a lot of play, and when you bribery 3 times against it, I mean, is that good? No. And he ends up eventually winning, probably because of that. But you look at the synergy base of this deck, and really the cards are intended to work very well together. On their own, they're still decent, but they don't get as many miles out of them. So I just think it's interesting to note that, while bribery was great in this match, I don't think it per se ends the game for this deck. And it's just kind of an testament to the resiliency of the deck itself. So let's go on to the last game of the match. All right, a lot less interesting game. I believe we get a Dark Depths combo on the opponent. So as you can see, this is a natural order game. We don't have a lot of mana ramp, but we have, some good value cards like Dustwatch Recruiter, which is what I intend on getting rid of or sacrificing. But I find something even better in the Wood Elves. Rate myself up to 4 mana. Attacking, there's no way I'm blocking that Tireless Tracker with my Dustwatch Recruiter. We see a Courser come in. Opponent starts getting value. He gets a lot of life. Gets, virtual cards in the form of clues. We end up playing out our natural order, get our Primeval Titan for the Dark Depths combo at this point. And, it's very nice. You'll note that we have Restoration Angel hand. So what ends up happening is he has Acidic Slime yet again. So we're like, oh, darn, we're just never going to get this Dark Depths combo off. We attack in, fully expect him to block with the Acidic Slime. I forget which lands we get at this point in time. But what we plan to do is Restoration Angel back the Primeval Titan just to spew value out of the board. That's what you'll end up seeing. We Restoration Angel, get 2 more lands out of the deck. And as you can see, even though the opponent has a decent answer to the Dark Depths combo, this deck just can accrue so much value. We see a Sarkhan come out, making a dragon, so that if for some reason I'm able to get the Thespian stage back, he can block it. End up playing out my new version of Eternal Witness, the morph version of Eternal Witness, Den Protector. We end up getting some more lands. Now, this is a very odd block, so I end up killing that with my Sully Pride Bench so I can knock out the Planeswalker. But when he blocks like that, as opposed to using the Acidic Slime and something else, because I can understand him wanting to save the Planeswalker, I very much so believe he's on a Living Death draw. So what you'll see is we start getting man lands because we want to play around Living Death. We also get the Homeward Path, which came in from the board because, obviously we don't want to get bribery. And if we do, we want to be able to take the stuff back. We play out the Academy Rector, which is kind of a hedge against Living Death, which we end up seeing this turn. Ends up working out pretty well for us because, we don't have a lot in our graveyard, but he doesn't really either. And the fact that we get to have a Recurring Nightmare come into play with that graveyard really is foretelling of the end of the game. So you'll see we end up attacking in. We know he's going to block with the Solemn. Oh well. It's out of the way, at least at this point. And we go ham with a Recurring Nightmare at this point and just start ripping every single man land out of our deck, getting rid of his graveyard. Really just getting so much value, it's not even funny. And then interestingly enough, you'll see that we're very much so going the combo route right now against his deck because, frankly, he doesn't have a very disruptive deck. He has a powerful deck, but not a disruptive deck. But what we'll end up seeing is we go after all our man lands, and really this game ends in kind of an odd way because all this powerful stuff is happening, and at the end of this game, what ends up winning is just good mid-range beats. So you'll see we transition kind of back into the good mid-range beats, and just take a note, good draw there, Containment Priest. So any of the more unfair cards that he may be playing at this point in time, we're not too worried about him because, I think like we talk about in the deck tag, we can turn it on or turn it off. We can go back to mid-range if we want and just play that. And it's plenty good. We have plenty of good mid-range cards, or we don't have to. So you see we pretty much clear out the board, trade everything off. He fails to find 3-drop on top of his deck due to Aven Mind Sensor. We begin activating our man lands, and the opponent sees the writings on the wall because we'll pump everything with Gavany Township, and that's the game. I hope you enjoyed the video series on RECSUR. Just so you know, RECSUR actually stands for Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest. The deck no longer plays Survival of the Fittest. So this is an older deck that before the banning of Survival of the Fittest was very dominant in the 100-card Singleton format. It typically was junk colors, like you see here, Abzon as they call it now. So very powerful deck back then. I do not advocate whatsoever that Survival of the Fittest ever comes back into this format. But because of, and I took a look at some of the older decks that used to run it, and because of some of the more recent printings for Search and Tutor Effects in green, I thought, I think this deck still has a lot of play in it, even without the Survival of the Fittest option available to it. And it really shined over the course of these matches, played a decent array of different matchups. And what I would say is I played a lot of games with this deck, and by far and away, as far as powerful decks go, I think this is the most powerful deck I've ever played in this format. I won't run it back again anytime soon because honestly, for me, it's more fun in the building as opposed to just the winning. I think this deck is great. Some of the matchups felt like they were very predeterministic, and I've kind of talked it in some of the forums that 100-card Singleton or players tromp around in, but I think green is really this showcases the power of green, complemented by other tutor effects in green and black and white. But as you saw, like in our matchup against the mono green player or against Dion's zombie deck, the deck can take a beating. It can lose a lot of resources and assets, but it builds so much value. It has so many decisions that the player can make to choose or have high selectivity of cards throughout a 100-card deck that a lot of the games play out very similarly. If you'll go back through and rewatch any of these, you'll note that we end up getting Primeval Titan and the Dark Depths combo into play every time. Now, that doesn't mean that we ended up killing with a Merit Lage every time. As you saw, we had Acidic Slimes hit it. We had, Silence the Believers hit it. But we were always able to get that. with the exception of the game just prior to this where we got bribery 3 times. So what I would say is I've played probably over 40 now games with this deck, and well and away around 90% to 95%, we're able to get the Primeval Tide, the Dark Depths combo to play, or really whatever combo we'd like to get into play, to end up closing out the game. So easily the most powerful deck I've ever played. Not an inexpensive deck. The mana base is a little pricey, and the creatures are a little more top end. But if this is a deck, if you enjoyed this deck tag and you enjoy playing a deck that has high selectivity and high decision making by the player, because I would say this is a slightly more difficult deck to play. You can play it out as a mid-range deck, but really what it is a tutor engine to establish powerful combos. And while some of those are, kind of like prefab, and we've seen them before, there are some nuances to the decisions that need to be made when you're making a selection and what you get. So, harkening back to the deck tech, if you look at how many tutors there are in this deck, and I'm not saying specific tutors like any card in the deck, but just tutors in general, you're looking at about 30 to 35 that do varied things. Some of them are just fetch lands. I'm including those as well. But very high degree of card selection, which equates to a lot of power in this format. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did and you want to pick the deck up, I hope you join the community, the 100 Card Singleton community, on Saturday at some point in time for the player run event, the Chainsaw Massacre, which is a 100 Card Singleton format. Unfortunately, not supported anymore by MTGO, but played religiously by all of us. That happens at 15:30 or 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the continental United States. I hope you enjoyed this, and please take care.